Hello and welcome to this wonderful panel discussion today. Today we are going to discuss about one of the main important aspects of the business of financial services and which is data. We are going to talk about how data in time is the most important essence. Data essentially is the blood of the financial services business. With me today, we have some very interesting luminaries from the financial services sector. And let me introduce you to all these luminaries. We have Mr. Sumanta Kumar Panda, who is from the State Bank of India. He's a general manager and he looks into analytics, AI, and related areas in the State Bank of India, which essentially has the largest repository of data in India today. We have Vaibhav Joshi, who is on the similar other side of the coin, where he is running one of the most interesting and forward-looking small finance bank, which is empowering the grassroots levels and also the SMEs in the country. Uh, and we have Mr. Balkrishna Singhania, who is a veteran in the area of insurance services sector. He is from HDFC Life. And along with all of them, we have Mr. Robin Tondon, who is from Denodo, which is doing a lot of interesting work in the area of data virtualization. Gentlemen, I would like to invite all of you on behalf of Banking Frontiers to join this session.
Thanks, Babu. Always honored to be with you. So my name is Balkrishna. I am a EVP for HDFC Life Insurance. About 20-year experience, mostly in banking and application of AI, analytics, data in various forms and shapes as data comes. So that's the brief about me. And yeah.
Hi everyone, this is Vaibhav Joshi. I work with Equitas Small Finance Bank in the capacity of Chief Digital Officer. Prior to Equitas, I was with Yes Bank for 6 years, and prior to that, I've been an entrepreneur, having done startups in food, payments, and technology side of things. That's it from my side. Look forward towards a great discussion. Thank you.
I'm Sumanta Kumar Panda. I'm currently heading the position of General Manager, Data and Analytics. Basically, I'm in charge of the entire bank's data. Its analytic team, its data warehouse, the business intelligence, and reporting for various requirements like ALM or this balance sheet requirement, or the risk and finance applications. So basically data and its analytics area.
So hi, I'm Robin Tondon and I work for Denodo. I'm a director of product marketing. I've worked in the software industry for over 25 years. A lot of focus on data and data integration in my career, as well as working in the areas of AI and natural language processing. So over the time, I've learned a lot. I've dealt with many things, and I'm always excited to talk to customers, to prospects, particularly when we have to discuss areas around data and data integration. So I look forward to the rest of this discussion.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Robin. And let us just get into the first warm-up questions first. So there is a deluge of data, and data, while on one side is said to be the oil, there is also a deluge of data where too much of data is lying everywhere, data everywhere. So what challenges are you seeing, or do organizations face when accessing, structuring, storing, and analyzing this data deluge in a timely manner so that the data is available in time? Maybe an insurance perspective, Balkrishna can start off, and maybe Mr. Sumant Kumar Panda can take it next. Balkrishna?
Sure. So basically, data is information unless we don't use it. I mean, or other way around. If we use data, it becomes information. Otherwise, it is basically just occupying your hard disk space somewhere in some sense. All of us know the amount of digital footprint that we give when we are using our computers, but even otherwise when we are buying a product. Anything as simple as when you buy a grocery today, they take your phone numbers. And just imagine the amount of data they create out of us, from the consumers, from the enterprises, from everywhere. So when we are working from the enterprise perspective, the data basically helps us understand the customer and the entire information in a logical manner, as long as we can use it in a meaningful manner. So, for example, who is the customer? How is it using it? What does it tell you about the customer? And the diversity of the information allows us to understand the customer better. So, for example, someone you might find goes to a high-end restaurant or other way around, with a diametrically opposite cost of the car. So you may have someone eating in a roadside stall and driving in a Mercedes, and vice versa. So we see all sorts of things, and each one of these things is information. And when it comes to financial services, there are broadly two aspects that I like to think about. One, more from a marketing or understanding the product and services that a customer would buy. And second, no matter what the product is, there is always an element of risk involved, whether it is a credit risk, whether it is for insurance underwriting risk, whether there is a fraud risk, which is probably everywhere, and so on. So making use of data in a meaningful manner is what the industry is doing a lot of it. What I do also see is a lot of organizations collect data, but doesn't know what to do with it. And what it means is that all the data are lying in silos and nobody understands it. And when you actually need to use it, you don't know where the data is. The tables are not documented. You don't basically have a capacity to use it in a meaningful manner, or you have a whole set of data which are sort of there in their own light, but you don't have a meaningful way to connect them. And even if you can, those processes are expensive and prohibitively time consuming, which means they are not easy to use. So all in all, that's what is a never ending problem, in a sense that while we solve some of the problems, new data sources, new problems keep coming, and that's what I would say.
So, Mr. Panda, how has been your experience when it comes to the deluge of data, structuring it, accessing it, storing it, and analyzing it? What have been the difficulties and possibilities that you have been seeing?
Yeah. So this data is there since the bank started. The understanding of the data, the importance of data came into the focus only recently, very recently. We had set up our data warehouse way back 10 years ago, and where that we could store all the data. But how to use the data, that was a big challenge, and it was really not very sure at what level the data to be used and how that data to be used, and the capacity of understanding the data was also not very good. So slowly and steadily, I think when this analytics and business intelligence, these two areas started working on, they could really find out the use of the data. And since last 7 years, we have this analytics department started in the bank. And starting from the ordinary descriptive analysis, we have moved on to this AI/ML sphere. And now we can verify this data, how the data is useful. And this data source is so huge. As you know, our customer base is 45 crore plus. And with this big data and expanding at a very high pace, we have various, our core banking, our various applications. And as you know, this UPI is growing phenomenally. All this has added to the new data points, and the new data points keeps on increasing. So that's a big challenge. the data as we manage, we have the traditional system of managing, and we are also moving out this modern system. So this is a definitely big task for us to understand the data, to collate the data, and find out the best way to use the data.
Fantastic. So Vaibhav, we have been seeing data silos in most of the organization. The ATM channel, the payment channel has its own silo. The contact center has its own silo. Or probably if you look at the branch channel, it has its own silo. Everything is captured in the core banking, definitely. How and an integrated data approach is definitely essential if you want to do AI or customization or personalization of the services and products. How are organizations approaching towards this? Any thoughts from you on this?
Sure, Babu. So we need to understand that, in a financial services organization, data silos are prominent, and they're prominent because of the legacy systems. Okay, so they happen when departments have certain automation requirements, and departments carry out solutions to take care of that automation, and then there is a data silo getting created. Now, multiple departments using multiple tools to generate data and not integrating them at the back end is what causes this data silo. And data silos are often created also because of data sensitivity. That is also an aspect that we need to understand. But having said that, in today's age of digital transformation, where data is continuously getting accumulated everywhere, often there is data that goes unnoticed. Okay, now this may not necessarily be financial data, it may be operational data, but integrating those data points to create some financial intelligence or to create business intelligence is extremely important, because that is how your business performance and opportunity optimization happens. So today most systems are available where CRM, ERP, they often offer cross-functional integrations and allow automated data flow or automated data exports. And of course, there are a lot of third-party solutions that are there, but the need of the hour is probably enterprise-wide data warehousing, because that is what data silo breaks the data silo. Again, when we are talking about data as a structure overall from an enterprise point of view, it is extremely important to understand that the data has to be looked in a holistic manner, and data cannot be looked in a in a broken manner. Now, to give you a case in point, if we talk about specifically banking or BFSI as an industry, lately with the advent of new age payment methods like IMPS, subsequently UPI, then AEPS, UPI 2.0, so on and so forth, and now with account aggregators becoming prominent. What happens is, there are multiple systems at the bank's level that are there. The data gets stored in these multiple systems. Fortunately, in the case of banks, yes, the data is stored, in a very secured and in a very, in a certain manner through which multiple systems can access it. But enterprise-wide data warehousing, Babu, ensures that at the end of the day, when that data is required for a different application, the accessibility needs to be there, and that is where when this is an architecture level problem, and that needs to be addressed at that architecture level. If you look at banks, most banks today are coming out with a solution to address this. Most banks are moving on to things like data virtualization. Most banks are moving on to big data. Okay, and that is where they are trying to develop AI ML layers. They are trying to develop intelligence across this AI ML layers, so that they can pick and choose the data on need basis. Okay. From a banking perspective, data is also very important, because where we have traditional channels like the brick and mortar branch setup or a ATM setup, at that same point, how can I enable that particular customer on a UPI transaction, for a UPI transaction or for a bill payment transaction? Okay, because today banks look at competing with these fintech entities which are coming in, and or for that matter, if I want to do a cross sell, and Balkrishna will agree with me over here that wherever he has partnered with banks, there he would want to sell insurance to that particular bank customer, and that is only possible if banking systems allow that kind of an integration. So yes, these technologies are extremely important, and that is the way forward. That is how we are going to address this.
Excellent, excellent. Balkrishna, do you want to make any quick point before I move to Robin on this, how you are integrating the data silos and getting a single view?
Sure. So right now what we have done is we have built a customer 360. We always had it in some sense or the other, but now we have integrated, I think, all but one core system into the same thing in a very painstakingly manner, which basically means when a customer calls you, the customer rep basically get access to everything that the customer policy could be, the interactions across different systems. It could be a WhatsApp chat customer had, it could be an email, it could be branch visits, and there are any pending requests and so on. So all of that is done. The thing that we basically believe is getting this information in the hands of the right frontline sales as much. Obviously, a big angle of security comes there, because at a corporate office, in some sense, it is fine because you are talking about secured environment. But when you are talking about frontline sales, you just have to also ensure for the customer data protection perspective that only the right information is available to the right guy. So for example, we hide phone numbers from most people's access unless there is a reason to. So there is an angle of data integration, but there is also angle of data security and right level of access to the right person. Most of the things which is at a record level is on a need to know basis. Anything which is an aggregated level, so total sales in a zone or something like that, that's a slightly different, again, yes, data security, but in a slightly different way.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that interesting perspective. Now, Robin, let me come to you. So how do you see this challenges of data accessibility, data strategy, data in terms of data integration and data storing all come together? And what is the mantra for trying to solve this problem? Of course, it is an ongoing mantra. What is your mantra for this?
Yeah, well, thank you. So if we actually consider banking is no different to any other sector. However, the banking and finance sector is more highly regulated. And if you go back to Balkrishna's point about privacy, governance, and making sure that only the right people have access to the right data at the right point in time. Now, let's take one step before that and say, okay, what are the things that can happen in organizations that create risk? Now, a lot of organizations will do a lot of replication of data. So they'll replicate from point A to point B because somebody needs to report on something over here. And you end up with this spider's web or mess of data across your organization. Now, historically, people said, well, okay, then create a data mart and bring it all into a data mart. That probably works somewhat in the 1990s, the early 1990s. Towards the end of the 20th century, the concept of data warehouses came about, and then beyond that, we had the data lake. All of these are perfectly true, but what you do find is that there's never one single nirvana in terms of a repository. And I've worked on many projects for many, many years. I remember working for one of the largest retailers here in the UK back in the early 2000s, and they were adamant that all their data would sit in a data lake. But they had applications that were running databases as part of the structure that had to replicate the data out of it, creating a compliance risk. So these are the things that you have to think about. So it's the first stage. So how do you solve some of these challenges where you've got real-time data maybe coming from the ATMs? So somebody's just made a transaction, they need it. You may want to report on that. You've got historic data, maybe sitting in an IBM mainframe, because these are accounts that have been around for a long time. Without picking on any particular of the banks in India, they're a very well-established banking infrastructure. So there's real-time data, there's social media feeds maybe, there's historic data sitting in data warehouses, there's IBM mainframes, there's all of these data sources exist within the banking world. So data virtualization will allow you to create this logical architecture. So we need to start thinking about this, because actually data fabrics are a way forwards when you create the architecture, and that allows you to access all of your data. And going back to Balkrishna's point, in a secure and governed manner. So going down to the whole point that we make here is only have the data available to the right people at the right time for the right reasons. So again, if you don't need to know the phone number, do not let it be visible. It's as simple as that. Building those governance rules through your data catalog are essential. And I as a bank, as a customer of banks, I've got accounts here in the UK. I actually have some accounts in India because I'm half Indian. So I want to know that my data is secure and that only the right people have access to it. So data virtualization will help you do that. A logical data fabric, which I know we'll talk a bit about later on, is the architecture that allows you to do this.
Interesting perspective. Now, what is the kind of impact that is being felt by organizations today when they innovate? Are they able to innovate fast using this existing old or conventional kind of data fabric, or they need something new? People are looking towards cloud on this, one of these as one of the important solutions. What is your opinion as a banker? Maybe Vaibhav can probably start off.
Sure, Babu. So we need to understand what cloud brings in, and being a banker and talking about cloud is going to be slightly tricky over here, because our regulator is very strong when it comes to these things. But yes, private cloud is something that is picking up today, and banks are moving certain data to certain degrees onto private cloud, especially the newest things like video KYC and stuff. See, cloud provides agility. It's kind of a virtual office setup with a flexibility of connecting from anywhere. Okay. Now, of course, public cloud is a no-go zone for us, but private clouds in a controlled environment, are the next in thing. From a scalability perspective, it is good. From a business continuity perspective, it is excellent. It is flexible. It is cost effective. If I have to compare it with the on-prem kind of a setup, then price difference is also tremendous. And then some of the aspects that we talk about, are security, data protection, location of data, which is domestic within the country, one of the stricter regulations that our government has brought in. And then, of course, on a private cloud, now there are technologies to manage the legislations, regulations, and the associated risks as well. Having said that, because I come from a small finance bank, and which was earlier an NBFC. Let me tell you the reality that is there in the industry today, Babu. The reality is that most of these financial institutions are still onto legacy systems on data. Okay, if we talk about things like data virtualization, if we talk about those, let me put a logical data fabric as compared to a physical data fabric, then cloud is definitely not the in thing for financial institutions yet. It is still picking up, and only the new age applications like a video banking or a video KYC and probably the PSP apps and payment applications are the ones that are being put on to cloud or a private cloud kind of a setup. Okay, that too, it is heavily governed, it is heavily regulated, because finally, when we talk about banking, when we talk about BFSI, it is finally the trust. Okay, when it comes to customer data, why does a customer bank with a bank and customer doesn't bank with any other financial? Why does a customer prefer to bank with a bank? It is trust. The customer knows that I can go to a bank and my data is secured, my transaction is secured, my money is secured, so on and so forth. Okay, so that is the same thing that we have to, and that is where I say heavily regulated, heavily governed, and I, at the risk of repeating myself or sounding like a broken record, okay, I will keep on repeating them, because that is where that is where, we are, as a financial industry, we are yet to, go full scale when we talk about, logical, data techniques. And that is where, artificial intelligence, I feel, can play a very, very important role. And we can move into, data warehousing and those kind of technologies, thereby reducing the dependency on the physical infrastructure, because that physical infrastructure also comes with a cost. Okay, not that costs is going to be much of a concern, but the more the data, the larger the cost. The larger the cost, the larger the security, the larger the governance control, the larger the audits, and then that whole plethora of things starts. That whole plethora of things.
Interesting. Mr. Panda, you are sitting on the largest repository of data, at least from the banking and financial services perspective, with the largest number of customers. Maybe I would like to understand a little bit from you on how do you see this transformation, especially when you need so much of agility and people are talking more about cloud and other things. So can you throw some light on how large organizations like yours are bringing in this agility, especially when it comes to the data? How can you make it more agile and more strategic?
Right. In fact, State Bank has clearly understood the importance of having a cloud, and the agility comes from the cloud is well documented, and the research is also going on. So what we have decided, the newest, as Vaibhav was also saying, about the newest applications. So in fact, a few years back, when we set up our own private cloud, it was aptly named as Meghdut. And that Meghdut has become very big for SBI now. In fact, our entire UPI system is runs on Meghdut. So the kind of transactions going on in UPI, you can see the financial transaction itself for SBI is more than 7 crores a day. And double, in fact, triple the time the non-financial transaction. So that way, the kind of load coming to the system, and for that, how immediately you expand your system to accommodate the new transactions flowing in, new customers being added. Those things can easily be, in fact, achieved in this private cloud. We have managed to manage these huge applications like UPI only through this Meghdut application. In our own traditional application, it would not have been possible. So similarly, all the intensive these applications are we are putting on Meghdut. And not only Meghdut, we are also experimenting in the use of public cloud in a limited way, in a POC kind of thing. We are experimenting. So both the traditional system and the cloud system, both we are adopting, and it's a hybrid system we are working on, and both are really helping us to become more agile and become sensitive to the new requirement, new changes, and that way we are beating this call.
Interesting. So one is, of course, you have been using your private cloud to the greatest possible extent to do that. Now, Robin, my question to you, when it comes to the data, especially the agility part of it, and of course, the banks and financial institutions have been conservative when it comes to using the public cloud, though now many of them are using it to some extent or the other. I'm sure my banking friends from the private sector and insurance sector would agree to it. What do you see is the possibility for organizations to transform into this, and how can they make this more and more agile, whether it be private cloud or public cloud? How they can actually get this data in time, in strategic mode?
So if we think about cloud migration, all sectors are migrating data to the cloud. Now, will they migrate every piece of data? No. I think that's a fallacy that some of the cloud service providers will promote. So you're going to have a blended hybrid cloud or multi-cloud environment. And in fact, what we see quite often is organizations will have traditional enterprise networks They may even then have a private cloud as well as having data that's in the public cloud. So now you've got that nightmare scenario of multiple different clouds and sources of your data. So sometimes people want a strategy of moving data from point A to point B to point C. Or sometimes people have a strategy where they say, okay, architecturally, that's fine. We've got this public data, we've got this private data there, we're not going to move them. So if we put data virtualization in place, if you are going through that strategy of moving through the different layers of cloud, you can maintain a holistic view. So with data virtualization, you create this single access layer that data consumers can access, whether that be business intelligence, data scientists, data analysts, applications. They see one layer, one standardized layer, and that's accessed using very traditional technologies and techniques. So for the technologists among us, we're using database connections or open APIs. So JDBC, ODBC, web services, you name it, we've got the availability. You can consume through that. Then if you're going through that migration phase, you move your data and it's quite agnostic to your consumer. So the consumer's never without. To go back to the final part of the question, which is, are we ever going to see this one cloud fits all? No, we'll never see that. Because, and I'll give you the reason, there are always things that are going on that means that the data will never all be in one location. So doing this whole data virtualization allows you to provide that unified layer of a single view into all of the disparate data sources.
Interesting. So one of the most important thing, Robin, that I want to also try to emphasize on, when you are using technologies like virtualization, okay, how is it that you are empowering all this to be done seamlessly?
So the interfaces that are available through the data integration, data virtualization technologies allow you to seamlessly migrate. So if you are only looking at that middle layer, when you've got things hanging off, that's where you're looking. So if it changes and it moves from here to here, that's absolutely fine. You can't see that. So that's very seamless access. So this is the whole part of the value proposition of the technology. And of course, we have the enhanced security on top of that from a governance and compliance perspective, so that we're recording who, what, why, how. So who's looking at the data, what data are they looking at it, how are they looking at it, i.e. through what application, and then you can interpret why are they looking there. So that's really, really important.
Fantastic. So one thing is very sure, especially when there are things happening like that of migration or like that of new projects, a whole lot of turbulence definitely happens at the data, at the infrastructure level on one side. But at the same side, when it comes to the front board, where the customer has to service the customer, everything has to be very seamless. And probably, I think a virtualization would help in that area as well, if I understand it right?
Yes, absolutely. So, one layer to access, one thing to look at. There's not the complex web of different links to different data sources. No, there's just one unifying layer.
Interesting. So now let me just come to Balkrishna. Do you think such kind of resources or solutions would do a great job in not only just customizing the experiences or things like that for the customers, but in your kind of roles where you can actually make a lot more sense with the data with virtualization than just having everything in that old sort of or the conventional data setup?
My first and general comment is, I will come to the specific also, is no matter what technology we use, usage of a technology, be it something like a cloud, private cloud, public cloud, data virtualization, data lake, no matter what you are talking about, it's not a solution to a problem in the sense that you can't just say, hey, I have brought cloud on my in my organization and all my problems are gone. It doesn't work that way. You have to build applications, you have to build ecosystems around that, and that is what helps. Otherwise, it will just be a capex and opex bill, and you can just write on your resume that I have set up cloud in my company. I think at the end of the day, our production systems are still legacy, which means that just the weakest link exists at more than one place. So we have to, in that sense, look holistically, saying what is possible. And by doing many of the things, what we have ensured is when the data moves to a certain layer, from there onwards, we can play with lot newer technology. But anything which is required real time, let's say you just paid and that transaction is on COBOL system, that's a 20-year-old system, for example, I still have to rely on technologies which are traditional.
Interesting. May I request Vaibhav? Vaibhav, you have been a digital officer yourself. How do you see, this flight into the age of new logic data fiber, which we are talking about, where organizations can actually benefit from the immense deluge of data, at the same time, not physically having that huge investment into the legacy, and at the same time you also have this data lakes and data warehouses and all, whatever is set up, you have to make the best out of whatever investments you have made as well there. Any suggestions from your side?
So, Babu, it's always going to be a gradual process. It is not a something that will happen in a one shot kind of a thing. The data warehousing part will always remain, okay, specifically in financial services organizations. And new technologies like data virtualization will eventually start playing a core role in the data delivery layer. Okay, but what we need to understand is, and let me take you slightly more onto the tech side of things when I talk about this. Let's understand what the data fabric combines. So we are talking about data management, we are talking about data delivery, we are talking about data abstraction layer, we are talking about something like a metadata, that plays an important role. Then there is data pipelining, there is business logic, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, all these new technologies may not be new, but we try to integrate all that into a single architecture, and that is where the crux lies. And that is why I said that data virtualization will eventually become the core of this. Okay, and why it becomes a core and why organizations have to go to that level, and that is where I kind of agree with what Balkrishna was saying, that it provides agility and it provides real-time capabilities, and these are two very, very critical components when we talk about data. Okay, real-time accessibility of data on need basis and real-time accessibility of correct data on need basis is what is the need of the hour. Now, if you are going to depend on so many systems, if you are going to depend on a data heavy infrastructure, then probably there will be dependency on multiple integration points, and wherever there are multiple integration points, those are also. That is why we have to move to this newer logical data technologies as compared to the physical data technologies. The main advantage again, Babu, is speed to market. The solution is actually built in a fraction of time as compared to build a data warehouse. So there, essentially, what we are talking about, in a data. Let me give you a very simple scenario. In a traditional data warehouse scenario, you have to copy the data, which means more hardware, more software. We are talking about more ETL flows, build, maintenance, etc., etc. There are a lot of things attached to it, but that's not the case with data virtualization. But again, I repeat my first point now. Okay, BFSI as a segment in India is something that is yet to pick this up in top speed. We have started picking it up. So yes, data warehousing, data lakes, those technologies will always be there. But at the same time, the logical ones, the data virtualization stuff, we started seeping in, and that will eventually become a core. I may not be able to give you a timeline, but that would depend on how fast the market changes. Okay, if there is more prominence of fintechs and neobanking players in the market, more prominence of them taking a lead, okay, then yes, that speed will be much faster because they will be working on these technologies from day one, whereas banks will be eventually migrating to these technologies.
Excellent. Balkrishna, you were sharing something.
Again, part of it is repeat that wherever you see the bulk data and bulk processing, we prefer to use the more traditional mechanism because we are processing a huge set of data, and that's what we tend to do. Now, what again we have done over a period of time is, unless it's a real-time data requirement, a lot of data we would move to, say, a data lake or something like that, and take the data from those systems and use those for our most of the usage, be it data analytics, be it many of those things. Having said that, one of the newest set of problems or basically data usage is around the unstructured data. So let's say voice data, photographs, video data for say video MER or video KYCs and all of that. Now those things, the traditional data model doesn't work anymore. So that's where a lot of logical data models tend to work better because they are stored in an entirely different manner. And we tend to use many of those kind of technologies there. So, and also, again, I'm repeating a bit, customer 360 kind of a thing. That's where we also use some of the logical data models.
Interesting. Robin, you have been listening to the financial sector for quite some time now on this particular question on the applications that are suited for the logical data and for the physical data. Two things I want to know from you. From your perspective, what are the kind of global case studies where organizations have been really using logical data for? And how can they actually make an interesting hybrid mix? Because you cannot definitely throw out the old data investments. And not only that, some of the things have essentially to be in hybrid on the old kind of conventional data. So how do you think we can balance it out as well? So these two questions.
Yeah, well, to take the question around balancing, I don't think of things as old data and new data. I think of it as data. It's data, it exists. And, you know, I take the State Bank of India and Mr. Panda's point. Data has existed since the bank existed. The bank has existed for, I don't know, well, certainly pre-independence and a long time before. So back in the day, it was physical ledgers that had physical entries. And today it's moved way beyond that. So we've gone through the transition of physical ledgers to electronic ledgers, and now we have a lot more. Sure, when we're talking about Denodo or about data virtualization, we're not integrating with the physical ledger. However, we can integrate with applications that do optical character recognition, for example. So do we do that often? No, not at all, but it is technically possible. Going to the point around case studies and people who've done lots of things, Denodo obviously has many, many customers across the globe. We've got 900 plus customers, and people have done things in every sector possible. Yesterday, I was talking to a colleague who's going to a military fair next week and looking at some of those use cases. Obviously, the data has to be very secure, very sensitive data there. Talking to colleagues around banking, people like UBS, they have a multifaceted architecture where they have, and they do have, you know, operations in India, where they have data in different geographies, but they can't move the data for regulatory purposes and reasons. And that goes back to another point we're talking about, cloud and private cloud. So they have to provide that regulated access across the environments. So they've deployed multiple configurations of the data virtualization technology to allow people to interpret and interrogate data. So UBS would be a good example. We have companies like Liberty Mutual Insurance in India with deployments, Visa, as in the Visa credit cards, and American Express. And they've all got similar problems, which is data in multiple sources across the planet or across India, and the ability to have that knowledge of what's going on and seeing below that level. And lots of things that are achieved, security being one of them, but also time to value. So being able to get that value out of the data, because people, and it's a long held discussion point, and I heard it being talked about like oil, like the new currency. It's an essential tool in modern business, and we've certainly seen this during the pandemic, where organizations have even to an extent integrated third-party applications into their data infrastructure because they want to gain further insight. So again, if you look at the banking sector, maybe Experian, you're going to need to have Experian integrated at some point in time to be able to work out people's creditworthiness. So all of this is, stuff that we're very used to having to do.
Exactly. So this is interesting. Now, let me just, before we start to we jump into the last question of consolidating everything, let me just take a couple of questions which has come from the readers to us, as well as from the people who have registered for this conversation. One very interesting thing is, how logical data fabrics can minimize the data replication, which can be time consuming, expensive, and post compliance risk. Any suggestions from any of the panelists? Please do raise your hands and take it.
So logical data fabric is this concept that we're not doing the replication. Now, some of the big advantages of that is the data is moving from point A to point B, but more importantly, you have instant access to the data. And using the techniques that we have, you can create these enhanced views of the data sets, and then you can interrogate them, extract the data that you need from a data science perspective, and using agile techniques, you can then immediately have access. I go back to something that's very top of my mind today, which is the latest Gartner Magic Quadrant 2021 for data integration tools. The two strategic planning assumptions, and by the way, we're very proud to announce Denodo as a leader in that Magic Quadrant for the second year running. But two strategic planning assumptions. Through 2022, manual data management tasks will be reduced by 45% through the addition of machine learning and automated service level management. So this is something that's really important. And then the second strategic assumption is, by 2023, artificial enabled automation in data management and integration will reduce the need for IT specialists by 20%. So what we see is the democratization of data. So I use an analogy where, if I may, when I started work, I actually have always worked in software, but the first software company I worked for had a pool of typists. Those typists would be writing letters and typing up the letters that the managers were sending to other people. Now, just think of that today. It's a crazy assumption that a software company would have a typing pool. It's a crazy assumption that you would have somebody else write your emails for you. Or if you have to write a Word document, you do it yourself. So what happened? Why don't we see so many typists anymore? Well, because the tools became easier to use. It wasn't that we all upskilled to an nth degree. We did upskill slightly, but my 84-year-old father sends emails. He sends text messages, he types. It's a part of his existence today. And trust me, throughout his working life, he always had a typist.
Fantastic. Thanks for that insight, Robin. Before we close, I wanted to ask all the panelists one very interesting question, which is, what is in your mind the wish list or the road next for the data in time for the future? Balkrishna, can I start from you?
Okay. I have two wishes actually. As a data guy, one, I think we will always keep winding and we will keep hoping for more data, more structure and everything else. So that's, I think, part of our job. Having said that, I think my first wish is being able to integrate the data in a meaningful manner, including third-party data and wherever I can get insights and useful insights. That's my first one. And the second one is data democratization in a way that the last guy, or depending on how you look at it, the first guy in front of the customer, get the right information in a meaningful manner. And the data in that sense do not get limited to, say, corporate head offices.
Interesting. And what about you, Mr. Panda? What is your perspective about the wish list or the future for data in tech?
See, the data resides mostly in silo in all the applications. Now, data warehouse brings the data, but it's a time lag. Now, the question is if real time, all the data will be integrated, available on need to know basis. That will be really useful. Not only the data from the internal sources, but also from the external sources. And not only the structured, but also unstructured data. All this integration tool is more important so that this data is available at the real-time basis and need to know basis.
Interesting. Good encapsulation. And Robin, a final word from you. What is the vision for the future?
The future's very exciting. I think if we look at some of the things that we are doing as an organization, and also some of the things going along around us, artificial intelligence, machine learning really is going to drive the ability to enhance. And that's the important thing. It's enhancing the core data with metadata that we know. So for example, making suggestive data views to data scientists based on their previous activity. So we look at what they've looked at and then we can suggest and recommend to them. We can do things like scaling and data management in a query. When you run a query, a data query, a lot of the times people are fearful because it could take a day, it could take 2 days. So using AI and some of our query optimization techniques, we reduce that to microseconds. So that's why you get the instant access and it's real time. So I think artificial intelligence, machine learning, real-time access are the keys that you will see in data integration moving forwards.
Interesting. So that essentially is the mantra of the data in future. Ultimately, the data has to facilitate all this artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all those interesting technologies which are going to create personalization. I had some fantastic questions from the people as well, from the attendees who were speaking about, yes, we have been talking a lot about acquiring customers, but how to retain and also keep engaging and enrolling with the customers on a longer time. And that is where all these technologies would come handy. And as per Gartner and Forrester also, they have been saying that the logical data fabric will form the foundation of next gen data and analytics. And let's hope that all the financial institutions are gearing up towards this interesting hybrid data future where a logical and a conventional data fabric would come together to create better future for all of us. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being in the conversation with us. Vaibhav had to urgently drop out at 5 p.m. since we had a short, we are elongating this conversation by 5 minutes. But anyways, thank you very much, all three of you, for a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much, audience. You have been a great audience too. You have shared at least 10 to 12 questions. We could take only 3 or 4 of them per se. But thank you very much. We had a very insightful conversation and look forward to more such interesting conversations with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Babu.
Thank
you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Panda. Thanks, Robin.